Halo definitely has the reputation of being a game franchise that evolves over time, constantly adding new features, or at least it once had that reputation. And with a lot of franchises, games build off of features that have worked well in the past, but rarely do we see a feature that is grown from an idea that ends up becoming one of the most beloved features in a game. And Halo Reach, with its reintroduction of Forge mode, formerly introduced in Halo 3, and the one single map that served as a canvas for so many different custom games, would define a culture of Halo fans who built lifetime memories on just a single map. Forge World stands out a cut above the rest, not only because of its good map design, but because of the endless possibilities that were capable, all because of its design ingenuity. This is why Forge World was so awesome. One thing that I think is really cool is going back and looking at some of the old Bungie Vidocs for the Halo games before they were about to release, just to talk about features and things to look forward to. And one of the most special ones by far is the Halo Reach Vidoc, where they talked about Forge World. Honestly, just listening to the first 15 seconds alone really paints a picture of how truly ambitious Forge World really was, and how in these pre-release days of Halo Reach, they knew that this would be a big deal. And interestingly enough, just looking at this Vidoc alone, it really paints a picture as to how an ambitious project turned into something so well crafted and interconnected in a way that Halo players were able to have a single canvas to build whatever they wanted. And interestingly enough, Forge World actually started off as 5 separate Forge canvases, but somewhere along the lines of production, they wondered, what if you could go from one section of the play area to another if you chose to do so? And if you look back to Halo 3, you would realize that with the Forge mode that was first introduced, there were a lot of limitations, things like budgets and item limits. The earliest maps from Halo 3 weren't really that eligible for a whole lot of forging, and it wasn't until maps that were built with Forge specifically in mind was there this sudden explosion in the Forge community and custom game community with a ton of interest in what could be created. And even with new maps that would come out, like Foundry and Sandbox, there still were quite a bit of limitations in place. But with Halo Reach, they decided to take this Forge mode and really invest a lot of time in pushing the boundaries of what was capable on an Xbox 360. Bungie worked really hard on engineering a system that would allow for more objects and more structures to be constructed within a single map canvas. They utilized an, at the time, new LOD system called impostering, which allowed for objects in the distance not to weigh as heavily on the load of the game itself. But honestly, all of that wouldn't even be that impressive if there wasn't this beautifully crafted world to build whatever you wanted to in back in the Halo Reach days. Forge World was massive, one of the largest playable spaces in all of Halo, but what really made this specific map stand out was that there were these specifically tailored landscapes in different sections that could serve as a basis for creating whatever game type you had in your head. These specific locations were designed in such a way where right away you can just start building and have a good foundation to start your structure on, but also in an open enough way where it never was too intrusive on your idea that you had in whatever it was that you wanted to build. And while Halo Reach strayed away from a lot of the classic Halo motifs and locations as it took place on the planet Reach, Forge World brought us back to Halo, the thing that Halo fans were most familiar with, and gave players access to a large set of building pieces that aesthetically aligned with a lot of the designs that the Forerunners were known for. In previous Halo games, these Forerunner structures were iconic. They're locations that you would visit, and now for the first time ever, you had your own little area on a mysterious Halo ring that you could design and make whatever you wanted. And it was just really cool how they bridged all that together in a way where it still felt like Halo, Halo, while also giving players the freedom to go wherever they wanted to go. Halo Reach had multiple different locations featured in Forge World that would serve as individual templates for building. There was the Canyon, which of course was one of the most popular areas as it was built upon the original idea of Blood Gulch, one of the most iconic maps of all of Halo. There was the Island, which was this round island with a mountain in the middle and a little area that you could cross between from one section to another, which allowed for a ton of unique game types to be built here. The Quarry was this rectangular area located way up on top of a mountain range section, and it was sized perfectly around the same size as some of the most popular Halo multiplayer maps in the past, like Halo 2's Sanctuary. And with it being symmetrical, this would serve as a really awesome location for a lot of more competitive play to be built upon. There was the Coliseum, which was this massive indoors structure that could be optionally walled off, which would give a lot of players a flat surface to build on and 4 walls and a roof. The pillar served as this rounded structure that could lead to anything really to be built upon it, but also reminiscent of Ascension from Halo 2. Alaska and Montana were 2 grassy areas located above the canyon side that could lead to really expansive gameplay that tied together into the canyon, or could serve as its own dedicated area separate from everything else going on in Forge World. And then there was this massive water area where so many players had the freedom to build floating structures or structures close down to the water that incorporated the water in one way or another. This area by this waterfall was nicknamed the Lagoon. Later on, after Reach had been out for a while, the modding community even went through and covered all of the water up with platforms so players could try different game types where you drove in this massive expansive area, and that was something really cool as well. And this would be the playground for so many Halo fans back in 2010 when Halo Reach finally released. I actually remember when Halo Reach was on the verge of coming out, I was already a huge fan of being able to create my own game modes and maps in Halo 3, and I was really excited about what would be possible in Halo Reach. So when Reach came out, the first thing I did was I loaded up a game with some of my friends, and we immediately spawned in. We went to the island and we just went through pretty much the entire sandbox of Halo Reach, looking at all the guns, the weapons, the vehicles, the different structure types to see what we would be able to build with moving forward. And that was such a cool experience. And we would go on to build maps, game types, custom games. We held custom game nights with our clan back in the day, and all of the maps were created by members in the community. So we weren't just recycling popular maps, they were all uniquely made specifically for our game nights, and a lot of them were a blast. One thing that was very noticeable when Halo Reach came out was kind of this direct response to the community making Forge and custom games so popular back in the Halo 3 days. It was very apparent that Bungie took a lot of the methodology that was used in crafting some of the most fun game modes from Halo 3 and evolved a lot of the processes that went into making those maps in a way that was more intuitive and easier to use. Things like rotation snap were added in, and the ability to phase and fix objects without having to stack a bunch of objects up or place an object, start a new round just to place a second object and have them fuse together. The ability to phase and fix objects along with having the opportunity to use rotation snap was a game changer, and it allowed anybody to jump in and forge something with relative ease, but also it allowed for the most dedicated and experienced forgers to take things to the next level and build some of the most amazing structures that we had ever seen. And while of course Halo had a massive community, there was matchmaking and there were custom games, there was this sense of community built just around Forge also. The fact that there was a file browser back in Halo Reach meant that you could just look through what other people had made and checked it out, and that was something that was pretty awesome. Just this sense of if you build something cool enough, maybe other people will see it. And I think that that was a major driving factor for a lot of people who tried out Forge mode. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there probably spent hours and hours and hours forging something to look just the way that you wanted, even though likely nobody would ever even see the map. There was just something about the chance or the what if, or the time that you could just show off your map to a friend sometime, which made the whole process worthwhile. Also, while there's other games out there that have really well fleshed out map editors and things like that, there was something specific about the way that Forge mode worked in Halo Reach. The fact that the the controls were so intuitive, where you could fine-tune every movement, every rotation, and figure out the X, Y, and Z axis without actually having to look at the X, Y, and Z axis was really awesome. And then being able to have a quick button combination that takes you to the precision editor really helped as well. It just made it so that forging maps became second nature rather than something that you have to think your way through putting objects down. It made the whole process not only easier, but more fun because you're more focused on what you're building rather than trying to figure out how to build things. And sure, there were more complicated things that were added into Forge mode, like figuring out safe areas and death barriers and spawn locations and spawning sequences and orders. Using teleporters was like a whole method that you had to take some time to go over and learn, but those things added so many possibilities that it definitely was worthwhile. There were YouTube series like on Rooster Teeth where they would look at some of the coolest maps and game types, or people would build challenge maps for things like horse and pig, and I remember watching those and just being impressed with things that the community had managed to make, and that's something that I think is really special. And sure, there weren't the most customization options when it came to a lot of the objects that you could place in itself. I mean, you had some choices in what color would be represented in a block or something like that, and we had the ability to delete all of one type of object, which was awesome, unless you accidentally did it on the wrong object, but still, it was laying the foundation for what the community would be able to take and run with for the lifespan of Halo Reach. And whether it was doing something creative like building an obstacle course based on jetpacks, or making a really cool parkour map, or one of my favorite things to do in Forge mode, which were play other people's puzzle escape rooms, I think Halo Reach has this reputation of having one of the best Forge modes of all time, and it's very obvious why it has this reputation. It was a mix of the ingenuity in building this map, but also giving players the tools and fostering a community around those tools that made everything worthwhile. And we've seen evolutions in Forge World with Halo 4 having some cool lighting and some new tools, even if it slowed down the entire process. Halo 2 Anniversary had some awesome things put into it and is probably the most underrated evolution based off of the Halo Reach Forge mode. And Halo 5 Guardians took things to another level in just the scope and scale of what you are able to do. But I think it's very obvious why Halo Reach is the most appreciated, or at least one of the most appreciated Forge canvases or Forge modes out of any Halo game. And while I spent so many hours back in the day forging maps and doing different types of things in Forge and custom games, one of the most awesome experiences and moments that I had actually was when Halo Reach was re-released as a part of the Master Chief Collection and put on PC, as well as having Reach added into the Xbox version of MCC, because 343 did something really awesome. They decided to update a lot of the tool sets that were available in Halo Reach and add more objects to the game. It's in a way almost like a full-on DLC expansion with the scope and scale of the new set of items that were added into Halo Reach when it was added into MCC. All of a sudden, there were new vehicles we could drive, new walls and scenery pieces we could put down. Being able to put down trees alone was such a big deal. It completely revitalized the Halo Reach custom games scene, because for the first time ever, players could build upon their ideas that they had years ago, or maps that they had made once upon a time, or even maps that they played on, or game types that they played, and create their own versions with a lot of these new settings. And that was something completely outstanding that was added into Halo Reach that often isn't appreciated. And even in the same vein, a lot of the tools that were added into Halo Reach, like being able to fix and phase objects, were retroactively put into Halo 3, and more maps from Halo 3 were utilized to include the sandbox of items that were featured in some of the more iconic maps back in the Halo 3 days as well. So those updates were amazing to actually see in these games that are over a decade old. After Halo Reach's run back in the day being this iconic location, Halo 4 would release and would try to outdo Forge World, but at the end of the day, I think most fans can agree that Halo 4's Forge canvases just didn't hold up in the same vein of what Halo Reach's Forge World was able to do. Now, the one great thing Halo 4 did definitely was the fact that they added in new locations and different environments. That was the one complaint from the Reach days that a lot of us had, was that while Forge World was a beautiful map, it would have been nice to have different settings settings, different skyboxes, and just different areas to vary up the places. And with Halo 4, there were 3 locations. However, none of them had the same staying power that Forge World managed to have, where it just dominated and was the most popular playing location. Whether it was things like soft kill barriers, kind of restricting where you could go on some of the maps, or just play areas generally not being as fun as some of the play areas in Forge World, it never really kicked off the same level of excitement that Halo Reach had. They eventually did add Forge Island, which were these flat canvases to Halo 4, which were more popular because it just gave you a variety of areas that you could just freely build on without any restraints, but it still lacked the same personality and charm that Forge World once had. Ever since then, even with Halo 5 having some great Forge canvases, I still hold out hope that one day we would be able to see Forge World brought back as a canvas once again. I'm all for having multiple different canvases across Forge, but being able to see this iconic location once again would be something incredibly cool. To this day, there's still something that keeps bringing me back to Halo Reach, and I think it has a lot to do with the great memories that were created in Forge and custom games. And while, of course, I'm nostalgic for these because it was right at those prime Halo glory days, I still find a lot of enjoyment out of seeing new creations that fans who are still holding on to Halo Reach and still diving into what Halo Reach has to offer are finding nowadays. I played the Sea of Thieves game mode, which is hilariously kind of awful, but great at the same time, and just the creativity there led to a really funny experience with all my friends one night, and it's the little things like that that just make Halo Reach, still to this day, incredibly awesome. If you like this video, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. If you like to see when we host custom games in the future, make sure you follow us on twitch.tv/RocketSloth. We finally got that username, which we're happy about. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.